chain smoke and I say fuck a lot. But I accept myself for the way I am. I accept you too. Viewer discretion advised.
For more than 40 years, Reginald Archibald, an alleged doctor, an alleged researcher working for the Rockefeller University Hospital, used his position to sexually abuse children as young as 2 years old. 2 years old.
Dr. Reginald Archibald was a prominent physician at Rockefeller University Hospital working primarily with children with growth challenges.
Dr. Reginald Archibald, who died in 2007, worked at the hospital from the late 1940s to the 1980s. In 2004, a former patient came forward with abuse allegations.
This month, 14 years after that abuse was reported, the hospital released a statement saying Dr. Archibald engaged in certain inappropriate conduct during patient examinations. The hospital and university deeply regret pain and suffering caused to any of Dr. Archibald's former patients.
Hospital officials say they referred the case to federal authorities. The hospital also hired a law firm which uncovered other allegations reported to the hospital in the 90s.
The New York Times spoke with more than a dozen of the alleged victims, most of whom were young boys or teens at the time of the abuse, who say Dr. Archibald molested them too.
Reginald Archibald was one of the most, if not the most, prolific serial sexual abusers in the history of the United States. Archibald likely abused thousands of children, thousands, for nearly 4 decades at Rockefeller.
Attention former childhood patients of Dr. Reginald Archibald, endocrinologist at Rockefeller University Hospital for decades. One of the most prolific serial child sexual predators in history. Hundreds of patients have come forward stating that the doctor sexually assaulted them. In 2018, the hospital released a report admitting that Dr. Archibald did in fact sexually abuse his patients at their hospital. If you were a former patient of Dr. Archibald and were subjected to sexual misconduct, you may be entitled to substantial compensation.
He fondled and rubbed naked children as he held them on his lap, forced them on his lap. He forced naked children to lay on an examination table and ordered them to rub or masturbate themselves. He masturbated and forced these young boys to ejaculate into test tubes or cups, and he watched as naked children stood against a wall and forced them to pose in various positions that included, with both boys and girls, close-up photos of their genitals.
He had me up against the wall, palms faced out, gown off.
Pete Katsikis says he was just 12 years old when he was sexually abused by Dr. Reginald Archibald. Katsikis is just one of over 100 victims who have now come forward about the abuse at the hands of Dr. Archibald, which came to light weeks ago after former patients received letters from the hospital acknowledging complaints against the doctor. That abuse, victims say, was coupled with sexually explicit photos taken during visits.
Every single day that I don't know anything about these pictures and where they are, I am being re-victimized.
I was lying on my back on the exam table, his hand between my legs. How does that feel? I was 15 years old, but with the physical maturity of a 12-year-old. Does it feel good? Dr. Archibald smiled as he massaged me between my anus and my testicles. Don't worry, he said. It will. He was revered like a god.
Matt Harris was one of thousands of former patients who saw Dr. Reginald Archibald as children at the prestigious Rockefeller Institute in New York City. Archibald was a highly regarded growth specialist who said he could help children who were not maturing like their peers.
He was like going to be our family's savior.
Archibald's research was supposed to help kids grow taller, but these former patients told us he sexually abused them. Harris was 14, Gail Coleman was 11, Robert Granado was 8, and Mitchell Schur was just 5. In a statement in October, officials revealed they'd investigated a complaint about Archibald's inappropriate conduct in 2004 and reported it to authorities. But they also found complaints going back to the 1990s, some deemed credible.
This means that finally I can hold Rockefeller University accountable for its role in what happened to me. They left me alone with a pedophile, and even their own investigators have found that people complained to them years before I walked through that door. And they made a choice. They chose to protect Archibald instead of protecting me and the thousands of other children that he molested. There need to be consequences for that choice.
And Dr. Archibald wasn't the only one accused of molesting kids at Rockefeller University. From the Daily Collegian, August 25, 2019, man files lawsuit alleging Penn State professor emeritus sexually abused him as a child. A suit filed Tuesday by three brothers in New York Supreme Court alleges Penn State emeritus professor Barry Dworkin sexually abused one of the brothers 4 decades ago while working at Rockefeller University Hospital. The complaint also says that all three brothers, now aged 53, 54, and 60, were abused on numerous occasions by Dr. Reginald Archibald, who Dworkin worked alongside. Dworkin reportedly sexually assaulted the second oldest brother during a scoliosis examination in his office, where Dworkin instructed the boy to remove articles of his clothing and abused him. That is the only incident the suit references in which Dworkin reportedly assaulted one of the three brothers. However, the suit alleges Archibald assaulted all three brothers on numerous occasions. According to the lawsuit, the examinations were conducted by Archibald and Dworkin alone, without the presence of a parent or a nurse. Also, Rockefeller University wasn't the only place that he molested kids. Victims say pedophile pool doctor lurked at Lower East Side Boys Club, January 19, 2019. He was a, quote, pool doctor at the Madison Square Boys Club, volunteering to give physical exams to poor kids in the Lower East Side youth program. He often stood on the deck watching them swim and frolic naked. From 1942 through the 60s, the late Dr. Reginald Archibald was, quote, a fixture at the club, which thrived on donations from New York City titans like the Astor family and the patronage of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. James Sullivan, a retired NYPD lieutenant, says he was violated and still suffers the emotional scars at age 72. Quote, the boys' club was supposed to be a safe haven, he said. Archibald hid behind the mask of two esteemed institutions to do this. Archibald was at the boys' club most Saturdays, quote, often accompanied by well-dressed men in suits and ties. One of the lawyer's clients reported Archibald took photos of him at the club from age 6 to 14, quote, positioning and photographing his genitals. Sullivan says he had just turned 13 in 1960 when he went in the pool and saw Archibald, who the kids dubbed, quote, Dr. Archie Balls, standing with a man in a dark suit at the side of the pool. Boys had to swim naked, a common practice at the time, believed to prevent the spread of bacteria on bathing suits. Quote, he saw me swimming in the nude and targeted me, Sullivan theorized. In 1967, Madison Square gave Archibald its American Medallion Award for his then 26 years as a volunteer. Archibald also trafficked some of his patients to Canada to stay at his own little private island.
A young patient of Dr. Archibald's was taken to his island retreat in Canada. I'm not going to try to pronounce this. Lake Temagami, which is in Ontario, north of Sudbury, in Canada. A good, 15 hours probably from New York, a long trip. And this is something that one of our clients has reported to us, that he became the summer helper, the summer boy that was taken to the lake, and that he was severely sexually abused during that time by Dr. Archibald. And he was allowed to go because Dr. Archibald used his prestige and his authority to convince the parents that this would be good for their son. This is something that the doctor did every summer, that he invited certain of his patients to go along, to help him around the house, to get the camp ready for the summer. And that the bonus for this child was that he would treat him for his acne during this summertime period. Instead, this client suffered severe and grievous injuries that he's still recuperating from this day at the hands of Dr. Archibald in Canada.
Reginald Archibald may have taken my innocence from me, but he will never take my ability to cope, to overcome, and to fight for what is right.
Fucking stoned.